You don't even know how to tie a tie properly, and you want to argue federal law? The courtroom went still. No papers rustling, no quiet coughs, just the weight of that sentence hanging in the air. Dorian's fingers, still adjusting the knot of his slightly crooked tie, froze mid-motion. Across the aisle, Attorney Richard Halberd smirked, all tailored suit and silver hair, as if the case had already been won just by his insult. Judge Karen Lewis raised an eyebrow, but said nothing yet. The jury watched, curious, maybe even uncomfortable. The young black man standing alone at the defense table didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He didn't break. "I believe," Dorian said slowly, voice calm, "that my tie has very little to do with the Constitution." Snickers in the gallery. Halberd's smile thinned. "And I believe," Dorian continued, walking calmly toward the podium, "that my client deserves a defense based on evidence, not personal attacks." He could feel the sweat down his back under the thrift store blazer, but his voice didn't shake. Not once. Halberd cleared his throat, putting on a false mask of professionalism. "Your Honor, I'd like to request that Mr. Blake's motion be stricken from the record. He is not a licensed attorney and is not qualified to—" "I am representing myself, not a client," Dorian interjected. "This is a civil case and I've met every requirement of the court." "I'm well within my rights," Judge Lewis finally spoke. "Mr. Halberd, sit down. This young man has done his homework and you know it. Let's proceed." Halberd's jaw tightened. Dorian could almost see the vein bulging beneath his temple, but it was more than that. There was something in the way Halberd kept looking at him, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't know he was part of. Like he couldn't understand how this kid from nowhere had shown up here, quoting legal precedent and dismantling his arguments without blinking. Dorian turned to face the jury. "Members of the jury, you've heard a lot today, but I want to ask you something simple. What matters more in a court of law, where someone came from or what the truth really is?" He paused. "Let it hang." And for the first time, someone in the jury nodded, just barely. But it was enough. "Hey, lawyer man," a voice called out behind him. Dorian turned, tray in hand, still buzzing from the courtroom. The courthouse cafeteria was sterile and fluorescent, full of the low hum of microwaves and half-bored attorneys. Halberd stood by the vending machines, arms crossed, a mocking smile on his face. Dorian sighed. "It's Mr. Blake, actually." Halberd walked over slowly, his leather shoes clicking sharply on the tile. "You're bright, I'll give you that, but smarts alone won't save you. This world doesn't care about clever. It cares about credentials, paper, power." "Is that why you insulted me in front of the jury?" Dorian asked, meeting his gaze. "Who thought they'd see my skin and my suit and assume I didn't belong?" Halberd didn't flinch. "I didn't have to assume." Silence stretched between them. Dorian looked away first, not because he felt ashamed, but because if he didn't, he might have said something that would have gotten him held in contempt. Halberd dropped his voice. "This is a $2 million case. You walk away now and maybe I forget that embarrassing little courtroom stunt." Dorian raised an eyebrow. "You offering a deal?" "A warning," Halberd said. "You think you're David with a slingshot? You're not even in the fight. You're a kid playing dress-up in a system built to chew you up." Dorian leaned in slightly. "You keep talking like that, and you're going to make this personal." "I'm not here because I want to be a hero. I'm here because your client illegally evicted 6 families from a rent-controlled building and hoped no one would notice." Halberd's smirk dropped. "You're defending a man who changed the locks while a mother was out buying formula for her baby. That's not just unethical, it's illegal. And I'm not going to stop until someone's held accountable." He turned to leave. "Watch your tone, Blake." Dorian stopped in his tracks, glancing back over his shoulder. "That's funny. You keep acting like you're the one in control." He walked away without waiting for a reply, found a quiet table in the corner, and finally took a breath. The knot in his stomach was still there, but beneath it, deeper, was something steadier. Not arrogance, not pride, conviction. This wasn't just about law, it was about justice. And he wasn't backing down. The basement of the courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting dull shadows across stacks of manila folders and metal filing cabinets. Dorian moved between rows like he belonged there, because today he did. He'd only gotten access after a long conversation with the clerk upstairs, quoting the Public Records Act line by line. Most people wouldn't bother. Most didn't even know the records existed. But Dorian did, and somewhere in this room was proof. He pulled open a cabinet marked Hollister Property Group and started flipping through eviction orders, lease agreements, purchase records. He didn't have a team of paralegals or a fancy office, just a pen, a notebook, and 2 weeks of sleepless nights reading housing codes. Half an hour passed, then an hour, still nothing. He rubbed his eyes, ready to give up. Then he saw it. A scanned document tucked between contracts, a city inspector's report from 14 months ago. Red letters at the top, building unsafe for occupancy, pending repairs. But the repairs were never made. Instead, the tenants had been forced out. Dorian's hands trembled slightly as he took photos of each page with his phone. This was it, the first real crack in Halbert's case. Then came the sound of footsteps. He turned instinctively, heart racing. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-30s, dark curly hair tied back, courthouse badge clipped to her belt. "You're Dorian Blake?" she asked. "Yeah," he said cautiously. "Why?" She stepped closer. "Name's Jasmine. I work in records. I've been following your case." He blinked. "Following it?" "Word gets around. Especially when a kid walks into civil court and out-argues Halbert." She glanced at the file in his hand. "That what I think it is?" He hesitated, then nodded. "They declared the building unsafe, then claimed the tenants left voluntarily. It's fraud." Jasmine's eyes narrowed. "If you're right, that's bigger than just this case." He studied her, unsure if he could trust her. "I might be able to get you internal memos," she offered quietly. "Emails, stuff that doesn't make it into the public file." Dorian didn't speak right away. "Why would you help me?" he asked. She smiled, tired and sincere. "Because my cousin lived in that building. She's sleeping in her car with 2 kids. You win this case, maybe she gets a chance to fight back too." And just like that, Dorian realized he wasn't alone in this. Not anymore. "Mr. Blake, would you mind telling the court where you received your law degree?" Halbert's voice rang out like a challenge, slick and cold. Dorian stood behind the defense table, hands resting firmly on the edge. "I don't have one," he said clearly. A murmur stirred through the gallery. Halbert paced slowly, savoring the moment like a wolf circling its prey. "So you admit you're not a licensed attorney, yet here you are, cross-examining witnesses and submitting evidence. Isn't that irresponsible?" Judge Lewis didn't interrupt. Dorian didn't blink. "I've read every statute and every case cited in this trial," he said. "The law doesn't require a degree to represent yourself. It requires knowledge, preparation, and respect for due process, which I've shown." Halbert smiled thinly. "And you expect this jury to take you seriously? You're 25, unemployed, and defending a group of tenants most people would rather forget." Dorian stepped forward. "I expect this jury to listen to the facts, not the insults." He turned to the jurors. "On February 3rd, the property owner told the media that the building was uninhabitable, yet just weeks earlier, he filed papers saying the property was in excellent condition. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a contradiction." Halbert raised his voice. "Objection. Argumentative. Overruled," Judge Lewis said before he could finish. Dorian locked eyes with the witness, the building manager, a stout man with slick hair and a nervous twitch in his fingers. "You signed that inspection report, didn't you?" The man hesitated. Yes. "And you knew repairs were never done?" "I was following orders," he said quickly. Dorian stepped closer. "Did you warn the tenants?" "No." "Did you tell them the building had been declared unsafe?" "No." The room felt like it was shrinking, all focus narrowing to this one moment. Dorian took out the photo of the inspector's report. "So when mothers packed their babies and left in the middle of the night, they didn't know the truth, because you stayed quiet." The manager lowered his gaze. Dorian let the silence stretch, then stepped back. "No further questions, Your Honor." As he returned to his seat, he caught Halberd staring at him, but the arrogance was fading. There was something else in his eyes now. Doubt. For the first time since the trial began, Halberd looked unsure. And Dorian? He finally looked like he belonged. It was nearly midnight when Dorian reached the library steps, shoulders heavy under the weight of his backpack. Inside, the late-night reading room buzzed with fluorescent quiet. Tired students, old books, and the scratch of pens on paper. He slid into his usual seat by the window. Jasmine had emailed him 3 files earlier that night. Internal memos from Hollister Property Group. He opened the first PDF and froze. Clear tenants from 1326 Lincoln before Q3. Delay maintenance. We'll flip it fast once rent control status lapses. It was dated 6 months before the first eviction. He leaned back, throat dry. This wasn't carelessness. It was strategy, premeditated. His mind raced. He knew what to do with this, how to structure it into an argument the jury could follow. But part of him just sat there stunned, because it meant every sleepless night those families spent in shelters or cars was part of someone's spreadsheet. He scrolled further. Another email. Blame structural faults. Force voluntary departures. No need to trigger relocation payments. It was signed by a senior VP. Dorian exhaled slowly, rubbing his eyes. Jasmine had been right. This wasn't just negligence, it was design. He thought of his mum, who cleaned offices after midnight just to keep food on the table, of the eviction notice they'd gotten when he was 14, of the landlord who lost their payment and sold the building 2 weeks later. He thought about how no one had believed them, and how this time he had a chance to make someone believe. His phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. If you use that memo, they'll come after you. Just be ready. He stared at the screen for a long second, then typed back, let them. He pulled out his notebook and began outlining tomorrow's argument, connecting the timeline, highlighting contradictions, weaving the truth into something the jury couldn't ignore. The city outside the window was dark and indifferent. But Dorian wasn't. He was awake. And for the first time since the case began, he saw exactly how to bring it all down. Not just Halberd, not just Hollister, the entire illusion of untouchable power. He didn't need a law degree to do it, just the truth, and the will to speak it. The courtroom was colder that morning, or maybe Dorian just felt it more. He sat alone, reviewing his notes while Halberd huddled with 2 junior associates, voices low and tense. Dorian could tell something had shifted. Halberd wasn't smirking today. Judge Lewis entered, gavelled the court to order. Mr. Blake, you may proceed. He rose, held up a single printed page. I'd like to introduce Exhibit 49 into evidence, an internal memo from Hollister Property Group, dated January 4th of last year. Halberd stood immediately. Objection. This document was obtained outside of discovery. It's inadmissible, Dorian cut in. Under Federal Rule of Evidence 803-6, business records kept in the course of regularly conducted activity are admissible. Your Honor, this memo was leaked, but its authenticity has been independently verified. I'm prepared to subpoena the sender if necessary. Judge Lewis paused. Overruled. The document will be admitted. The memo appeared on the screen overhead. Dorian stepped forward. This email outlines a deliberate plan to force tenants out of rent-controlled units under false pretenses. It refers to those families as obstacles to profitability. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. Dorian turned toward the jury. These people weren't just displaced, they were targeted. Their absence wasn't an accident, it was a business strategy. Halberd was pale now, flipping through his binder, like he might find something to erase what had just happened. So you saw earlier how the defense tried to discredit me. My age, my background, my tie. He smiled faintly. But none of that changes the facts. He let the room breathe. My name's not on a door. I don't have a firm or a title, but what I do have is the truth. He paused. And I think this jury can see that. He sat down. Silence. Then the judge nodded. We'll recess until closing statements tomorrow. As people filed out, Dorian felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned. It was the same juror who'd nodded days ago. Middle-aged man, rough hands, quiet eyes. "You're doing good," the man said quietly. "They don't expect people like you to fight this hard." Dorian swallowed, his throat tight. "I have to." The juror nodded once more and walked out. Halbert stayed behind, still seated. For the first time, he looked like a man who'd lost control. And Dorian, he looked like a man who never needed it to begin with. The room was packed. Word had spread. A young black man, self-taught and relentless, going head-to-head with one of the most powerful firms in the city. Reporters lined the back wall. A few people stood quietly along the aisles, waiting to see if the system could be bent, even a little. Dorian stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the center of the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "you've heard a lot in the past 2 weeks. You've seen documents, you've heard testimony, and you've been asked, and again, to look past the truth." He let the silence settle before continuing. "The defense wants you to believe this is complicated, bureaucratic, a matter of miscommunication, but it's not. It's simple." He held up the memo again, just for a second. This wasn't carelessness, it was calculation. They didn't fix the building because they didn't want to. They wanted the tenants gone, quietly, without lawsuits, without relocation fees, just gone. Halbert stared down at his legal pad. He hadn't objected once. "My mom raised me to believe that truth was power, that when people try to talk over you, you speak clearer. When they try to shut you out, you walk in anyway. When they say you don't belong," he paused, locking eyes with Halbert, "you prove you do." He turned back to the jury. "I'm not a lawyer, but I am a man who's seen this story before. Maybe some of you have too. Maybe someone in your family has lived it. A letter taped to the door, a deadline with no way out, a quiet theft of dignity." He stepped closer. "This case isn't just about one building. It's about whether justice is something you can actually touch, or just something we talk about while people lose everything." He looked down for just a beat, then back up. "You have the power to say, this wasn't okay, that this city belongs to everyone, not just the ones who can afford to rewrite the rules." He nodded once. "Thank you." He returned to his seat. And for the first time since the trial began, he felt peace. Whatever came next, he had told the truth, fully, loudly, unapologetically. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough. The jury was out for 4 hours. Dorian sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, staring at the vending machine. He hadn't eaten all day. Couldn't. His stomach was tight with knots, not just about the case, but everything it stood for. Jasmine joined him on the bench, sliding over a lukewarm coffee. "They're not supposed to take this long unless they're split," she said quietly. He nodded, but said nothing. "You think you got through to them?" she asked. "I think they saw something they couldn't unsee." Before she could respond, the bailiff appeared at the end of the hall. "They've reached a verdict." Dorian stood. His legs felt heavy, like they belonged to someone else. Back inside the courtroom, everything was still. The jury filed in. The foreperson, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense stare, handed the form to the judge. Judge Lewis read it silently, then looked up. "In the matter of Blake versus Hollister Property Group, on the claim of unlawful eviction and malicious fraud," Dorian's heart pounded, "we find in favor of the plaintiff." A soft gasp echoed behind him. Then came the second line. "Damages awarded in the amount of $1.7 million. Someone clapped just once before the judge silenced the room. Halbert didn't move. He sat as if made of stone, eyes fixed on the floor. Judge Lewis turned to Dorian. "Mr. Blake, you presented a case that was clear, thorough, and grounded in truth. This court commends your effort. Well done." He nodded, unable to speak. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward him, microphones and cameras in hand. "How does it feel to win against a top-tier firm? Are you going to law school next? Who taught you all this?" Dorian held up a hand. "I'm not here for interviews," he said. I'm here for justice, and today, we got some. He turned, found Jasmine near the steps, her eyes glassy. That's for your cousin, he said softly. She smiled. And for every person they didn't expect to fight back. Later that night, Dorian stood outside the building where it all started. Boarded windows, chain-link fence. He looked up at it, wind brushing his face, and imagined laughter in the halls again. One case down, 100 more waiting. But now he knew the system's weakness. It wasn't truth. It was people who never gave up on it.